Hello, Wayne. Thank you so much for this.
It's my pleasure.
And welcome to everyone joining us by YouTube, which has turned to be a great way to gather in spirit and from the heart. We're going to start from the root. Can you tell us about the lineage? Your master, Ramesh Balsekar, was a disciple of Nisargadatta Maharaj, disciple of Siddharameshwar Maharaj. They say it isn't properly Advaita Vedanta, but more the Naval tradition. Could you please tell us what difference there are, or the proposal of this approach?
So the lineage, the concept of lineage is, for me, not very significant. I am certainly grateful for the fact that there were teachers before me who carried the seed of this truth in their own way. But for me, what is important, and I call this, what I talk about, the living teaching of Advaita, because it has this seed of life in it. And what I am concerned with is this the living pointing to the truth. And the truth is certainly pointed at in many different ways. One of them is along the tradition, the Namaste tradition. Advaita Vedanta is another very well-established tradition. Zen Buddhism, Chan Buddhism, Gnostic Christianity, all of these traditions carry the seed, Sufism, they carry the seed of this living teaching. And so what I am concerned with is not so much this guru appointed this guru, who appointed this guru, who appointed this guru, as much as I am concerned with this essential truth that is conveyed and carried from one teaching or teacher to another. And in my case, Ramesh Balsekar was the living embodiment of this teaching. His guru, Nisargadatta Maharaj, was the living embodiment of the teaching for him. For me, I never met Nisargadatta Maharaj. For me, it was not a living embodiment of the teaching, and so my resonance is not very strong with Nisargadatta Maharaj. I've read through I Am That, it's okay, but it's not a living teaching for me in the way that Ramesh Balsekar's teaching is.
What is the essential truth you speak about?
The essential truth is that which is here, and the teaching is pointing your attention to. So it does not define what is here. It only facilitates your looking at what is here.
What kind of attitudes or virtues must the disciple possess in order to be able to really unveil that reality?
There are ultimately no requirements. It can happen at any moment with anyone. My observation is that those people who come with an open heart and with an open mind and genuine curiosity have the greatest receptivity to this teaching. And when I say receptivity, it is the teaching gets inside of them and this seeing happens.
And every element that spiritual traditions regard as necessary for the disciple to be ready to see reality, devotion, ritual chanting, mind purification, giving up attachments. Aren't all of these requirements for enlightenment?
My own observation, which is not the truth, is that these practices may be useful. But I have also seen the same practices become hindrances, obstacles. The classic example was a man who came to see my guru, Ramesh, when he first came to Los Angeles in 1987. And this man came and he, at the break in the talk, he came up to Ramesh and he says, Ramesh, do you know how many hours per day I meditate? Ramesh said, no. He said, I meditate 14 hours per day. And he said it with such pride, that it was like he was describing his new Ferrari. No difference. I have 14 hours of meditation per day. It is just like his Ferrari or his Rolex. Look what I have. And so in his case, the meditation had become an obstacle. Now, this is not to say that meditation is a bad thing. It leads to this. Only that the meditation itself is a tool. Bhajans are a tool. There are many tools. And which one is useful and effective for you? We don't know.
And does the master know which tools are necessary?
The master may be necessary, but it is not a necessity. Truly, the universe can do whatever it wants, and this insight can come in any possible imaginable way. Now, certainly, in my case, the meeting of my guru, Ramesh Balsekar, was the most amazing occurrence in my life. My heart opened in a way that I could never have imagined possible when I met him. Now, this to me is the blessing of the guru. And it has nothing to do with what the guru is going to get you. You see, the question, do I need a guru to get what I want, to me is misconceived. That what we are talking about is the guru is a blessing. It's the supreme blessing to have that resonance. To open your heart, to be open in a way that this guru-disciple relationship makes possible. But it isn't a commodity that you must acquire in order to get to the next step on your desired mission.
Where does the world sprout from? Ramesh says that the nature of potentiality is to self-activate. Sufis say, I was a hidden treasure and wanted to be known. But most of us live without knowing it. We die to see it and we seemingly can't. Why does God need to discover through the mirror of manifestation?
So, the question itself is based on the notion of God or consciousness or totality as an object that then has properties or qualities or characteristics that are very human, which is to want something, to try to obtain or to achieve something. Because this is how we are conceiving the property of the totality. And the question is, okay, now we say it is this big thing. What is it trying to achieve? But this is to limit the totality in a way that this teaching is pointing beyond and saying, when we talk about God, when we talk about source or totality, we are not talking about a thing with properties. We are talking about the totality of what is without a second, that has no other, and so is not an object itself. It is that out of which all objects come. So when we talk about the manifestation, we conceive, in order to talk about it, we have to conceptualize it, certainly. So the concept that I have found most useful is to conceptualize this totality as the ocean and say, all there is ocean. There is nothing else, no possibility of anything other than ocean. And then, as Ramesh said, because the ocean is vital, it is alive, it isn't dead, that there is this life or vitality implicit in this totality, then it must at some point actuate, go into movement. And the movement is the waves of the ocean. And the waves represent the objects, all of the things in the world. And so we have billions, untold billions of waves, each one different. A galaxy is a wave. A microbe is a wave. You and I are waves. We are these movements of the only thing that there is, this ocean. So it is this which is in constant movement, and each wave has its own properties, its own qualities, its own characteristics. And there are the relationships between all of these things. And yet, the pointer of this teaching, Advaita, means not to. And so, despite the fact that there are billions upon billions of waves, they are not two. They remain one thing. They remain ocean even though there are billions of them. So it is in this way we have the unity and the multiplicity.
So the next question would be, where does ego come from? The illusion. Is it God created? With what end? If it produces so much suffering, why call it divine play then?
So, to go back to our metaphor of the wave, the human wave at approximately the age of 2 years old has a most amazing property that at around 2, every human wave develops the sense, I am not a wave. I am a droplet, which means I am separate and independent of everything. And it is at this point that the suffering begins. So, now, why this happens? I don't know why anything happens. Ultimately, why the universe is this way. Why isn't it some other way? I don't know. This teaching only points to what is. It says, look at what is. What is amazing. What is extraordinary. Even the pain and the suffering is amazing. And yes, it is hurtful, and yes, it is often ugly. But there is also untold beauty in this as well. The fact that this complex structure exists is extraordinary. Why? We can only speculate. And the speculation has gone on for thousands of years. An untold number of books have been written about why God does this. Why? What was the purpose of suffering? What is the meaning of this? Trying to put some kind of human quality and characteristic to this vast, unimaginable complexity. To simplify it into the most very basic human terms. And when you can get free of the why and get focused on the what, look at what is here, then wonder is spontaneously happening. Wonder comes from the recognition that, look at this. This is amazing.
So what about evil? In this seeming duality in which we live, what would be its role?
Once again, why suffer? I don't know why there is suffering. I can only point to the fact that there is suffering, and when you look at the suffering, you may be able to identify what is at the root of this suffering. And as we talked about, at the age of 2, this false sense arises within the human wave. I am not a wave. I am independent. I have independent power. I make things happen. This is the sense of being a droplet. And coming from this false sense comes the suffering. So in this teaching, we're pointing to where the suffering arises from. And sometimes when you can recognize this, the power of this false notion is dissipated because it is recognized as being false. And then your true nature, what you truly are as the wave, and by definition, what the wave is only a movement of ocean. So when you know yourself in this way, then the suffering dissipates.
So is destiny already determined? Or can we influence it with our prayer, intentions, effort?
So the question is, can you influence your destiny from your own power? By exerting your own power to convince God to change His destiny so that it's a little better for you. Today, in this hour, we can't look at all of these traditions. There's thousands of years of ideas, some of them beautiful, some of them crazy. And if we're trying to take apart each one, it's going to be impossible. So let's go with what you want to know and maybe what I can point to.
Do human beings have free will?
So, of course, this is a question that people have asked for thousands of years. Chances are we are not going to solve this problem right now. The living teaching of Advaita doesn't enter the argument. It asks instead, what are you? Are you an independent droplet, which you must be in order to have free will? Because to have free will, you must be independent of outside forces that determine what you do. If other forces are determining what you do, your will is not free. It is determined. So the question is, are you a droplet, or are you a wave through which the universe is moving to produce action, thoughts, feelings? And this, the living teaching of Advaita, doesn't answer the question. It only invites you to look for yourself, to see if you can find the truth of what you are, independent of philosophy, independent of the concept of free will, to find out what is your nature, what makes you do what you do.
So how does one make that self-inquiry to come to this knowledge?
So once again, this living teaching is not providing a formula, but rather through the questions it asks, the stories that it tells, it points you in many different ways to look at the question, and perhaps inspires you to do it, rather than telling you how you must do it.
Ramesh Balsekar diluted his whole teaching to "Thy will be done." And many people can't help but wonder, why does God will a war or some terrible things that happen?
And this is the inherent problem that comes with this model of God as an object. Once again, as we talked about earlier, the moment that you conceive of God as an object, then the question is, what are the properties of this object, and why does this object perform in this way? And Ramesh, of course, was talking to many different people at many different levels, and one of the ways he talked about it was to talk about God in this way. My personal approach is a little different, and I prefer to concentrate more on focusing on the essential question of your nature, of what you are. Because it then, in the recognition of what you are, what makes you do what you do, then the understanding that what others do and how it is that they do what they do, both good and bad, is recognized. And it is a wholeness, a totality, in which good and bad, in beauty and ugliness, exist together in a wholeness. And it is, you see the unity of things even in the horror of genocide, in the horror of war, of torture, of the most reprehensible kinds of human behavior, the things that hurt our hearts just to imagine them. The fact that it hurts our hearts so much is the other side of the fact that we have the capacity to feel for another, that we can connect to the pain of another human being. This is a beautiful thing. And this is the other side of the horror. So to recognize that one brings into existence the other, that it is part of a wholeness, does not diminish the horror, but it puts it in context. You realize that the world is not only horrible, which is, it may feel like when you're seeing something so devastatingly ugly. You say, the world is a horrible place. It can contain such misery, such awfulness. But when there is a recognition of the wholeness of things. When you expand to include everything, then the horror takes its place as part of the wholeness.
Here is another quote from Ramesh Balsekar. The sage, as well as the ordinary man, participates fully in this movie of life. If there is something tragic, there may be tears in the sage's eyes, like the ordinary person. If there is humor, he will laugh as wholeheartedly as the ordinary man. But the only difference is, while the ordinary man sees life as it happens as real, the sage is never unaware of the screen of reality of consciousness on which this unreal movie of life is being shown. Could you please elaborate on that?
So, this particular pointer of Ramesh's is almost exactly what I just finished talking about in terms of seeing the context. What the quote common man is consumed by the horror, and his entire existence is in that moment that horror. For the sage, there is always the perspective that includes the totality. So it is both at the same time the screen and the content of the screen, the wholeness and the immediacy of whatever is happening. So it's both.
You say acceptance is not something we can generate, but it has more of a quality of grace to it. So the question is, can grace be cultivated?
And my reaction is, yes, one can possibly cultivate grace. In the same way, one can possibly cultivate the ground out of which the flower grows. Can one make the flower grow? No. Can one control whether the flower grows or not? No. Can one go out and prepare the soil? Absolutely. Whether that leads to the flower growing or not, we don't know. But yes, in that way, grace can be cultivated. But always, or acceptance can be cultivated. But always when it happens, then we experience it as grace, as a gift. And those who live close to the land, who grow things, are connected to this energy. That this which is growing is a gift. This is God's grace that is coming, because they know they can't make it happen. They can't guarantee that the crop will come. There is no way to make it happen from their own power. A farmer knows this. It depends on far too much. And so, this recognition is the perspective, is the expansion, the recognition that what is happening, what comes, whether it's beneficial or not, is part of a vastly larger occurrence, a bigger context.
Could you please tell us about a metaphor which I find amazing about the pendulum? You can only escape the labyrinth upwards.
You have been doing your homework. So this is the metaphor of the pendulum is when the pendulum metaphor is that there is a movement between the polaric opposites, between that which you like and you don't like, health and sickness, happiness and sadness. And this is going on. And when you are identified at the very tip of the pendulum, Then when things are going well, you're ecstatic. When things are going not your way, then it's horrible. What happens sometimes is you move up the pendulum. You can say, and this is often thought as the understanding of the seeker, the seeing that this movement is happening. And your identification as the one responsible for this happening. This is the key word. That when you no longer are taking responsibility and feeling that I am making this great thing happen, and you're very proud, and then you feel I am responsible for these horrible things that are happening, and you feel guilty. This movement can diminish as you recognize that this is simply happening. You are less involved as the author of it. And the less identified you are, the smaller the movement from pride to guilt is. A very small movement. And then as you get to the very top, everything is happening, but at the fulcrum, you are not moved in the same way by this movement of life. Now, most people want to know, how do I keep the movement from happening, either to get it to stop here with all the things I want, or if that is too much to ask, to be centered, to be still, in the still point. And right here. The problem is that this is death. Because this is the movement of life. The pendulum is the movement of life. When you try and stop it, you're trying to be dead while you're alive. It's very difficult. I've tried it. I did, but it's another story. So, the problem is, seekers have recognized this for thousands of years. This is a greased pendulum shaft. And you get up to this point and there's a real quiet that comes from not being moved around like this, to not feeling that you are responsible for everything. Very quiet and peaceful place to be, even when you're in pain. It's a quiet kind of pain because you're not responsible for it. You're not guilty about it. You didn't make it happen. And so, when you slide back down again, you get desperate. See, I have to get back there. I want that. And this is the misery of the spiritual seeker who has experienced this kind of recognition and this kind of seeing of things. So the idea is that when I am enlightened, I will be here at the fulcrum of the pendulum. But in fact, what it is that the enlightenment is simply the absence, the death of this which moves up and down. That identity as an independent object disappears. And then what is left is life, the movement of life.
Have we been idealizing the spiritual masters, the saints? Is there a correlation between enlightenment and infallible behavior?
Yes. Well, what has happened is we have confused two things. Traditionally, two things have become very much confused, and that is saints and sages. Okay, the saint is about behavior. We measure a saint according to his behavior. And we say, a saint is someone whose behavior is representative of the highest standards we hold as a group. So, and since group standards are different, saints are different in different groups because they value different things. But the point is that the saint is about behavior. Now, if you read the writings of saints, many of them suffer because they say, I had this bad thought yesterday and I shouldn't have had it, and only they know this. But they're suffering because they feel I should not be as I am, even though everybody else is going, oh, you're the best. You are God incarnate. You are so good because look, you're so nice. You do all the right things. You're perfect. So you're a saint. We worship you. You're good. And but the saint himself is suffering because he knows that there are aspects of himself he should not have. The sage is not about behavior at all. The sage is the one for whom the very notion, the idea that what I do is authored by me is impossible. So there is the recognition that whatever I do, whether it's something that everyone is applauding or something that everyone is throwing rocks about, is not my authored doing. So of course I prefer the pleasurable things, and I would rather not have the unpleasurable things. But there is no guilt, no pride. It is the most basic humility. I am what I am. I am as the universe has made me. I do as I am led to do. Be it wonderful or ugly, this is what I am as part of the functioning of the entire universe. So that is the state of the sage. And the sage never suffers. Even though his behavior may be, the society may be throwing rocks at him. They may incarcerate him. They may kill him for his behavior. But there is no suffering.
Thank you. That is actually very revealing. Another question is about spiritual experience and the difference between it and full realization. What would that be?
So spiritual experience is that which happens for the seeker. The seeker has periods of involvement and then periods of unity, of stillness, of oneness. And they define each other. And they are ultimately dependent upon each other. There cannot be stillness without movement. There cannot be movement without a reference of stillness. They need each other. As I said before, the sage is off of the pendulum. There is no movement, no possibility of involvement, because that which would be involved is seen as having no existence. And it never had any existence. At best, or at worst, it was a false sense. What we would call a false sense that brought the suffering. But even that is recognized as having been part of this wholeness, even that. All is as it is. Perfect and imperfect depend on each other. Flawed and perfect depend on each other. It is seen as part of what is in its totality.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.